We'll be right back. Welcome back, listener. This is Aaron Richmond, host of Aaron's Opinion, the podcast for blind people, where we're certainly talking about issues in the blindness community. Okay, so now we're back with Carrie Morales, host of the Live Accessible channel here on YouTube. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that with Uber, there will always be a constant issue of going both ways. Drivers getting hurt, which does happen, and blind people getting discriminated against by drivers, which does happen. So it's kind of the type of problem where I'm not entirely sure there is a complete fix, a complete solution to it. Um, but what are some other issues that you have seen, or some other stories that you can tell our listener?
Well, I do want to also mention that it's not always about questions,
Sure.
where we can educate people. Like,
Yeah.
for an example that comes to my mind is my husband, who is totally blind. Whenever he goes to the hospital, usually somebody who is aiding him in guiding where he needs to go, usually um, grabs his arm, and it's just something simple like this. And you would think that in a hospital where I'm sure it's not the only blind person who visits there, that they would know not to do that. So those are the instances where I know that it's very easy to be angry at that or that kind of handling, but instead of doing that, you can stop. And this is what he does. He stops and he tells them, how to actually guide a blind person. And that way, in the future, when they do come to another person who is blind, they know what to do.
Yeah, I would tell you I would not respond well to that behavior. It is quite common though. I see it a lot. It's very, very, very common.
And I understand the frustration and and the anger you can feel and reacting in a very negative way to that, to basically manhandling you. And I mean, I can appreciate that. But at the same time, if we talk to them and we correct it instead of only getting mad, that's when they can have an experience to really change and alter their actions instead of just like, oh, okay, he's really mad or something like that. It'll probably stick to them better.
I mean, I would hope so. I mean, anytime you're able to successfully educate someone, go and do it. I mean, I completely support that. But I am frustrated, as you can tell. I'm frustrated by the frequency at which people need to be educated. That is the problem that I am seeing more and more and more, is that people who should know how to behave are not able to do so. And I really want to know why that is. I want to know why we were having such a hard time. I mean, I
Well,
understand.
is,
Yes, yes.
is it the same people that you have to speak to?
it's not necessarily the same people, but it's the same types of environments. You know, hospitals,
Mm-hmm.
public buildings, airports,
Oh gosh. Okay.
the worst, 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 worst. I'm not going to make a big scene on my podcast about it, but it was so bad that I had to actually write a complaint. I had to complain to a CEO of an airline about the way I was treated. So I don't. I'm not going to tell you I sympathize with people who work at airports. I don't. That's you're kind of on my naughty list if you work at an airport. So if you're listening and work at an airport, maybe lie to me and tell me and tell me you're, I don't know, the manager of a sports team or something. But yeah, I do find that at certain parts of society over and over and over again are just not getting it year in and year out.
I
So
think
yeah.
I think that the change will have to come from both each individual blind person and educating everybody that we come in contact with, as well as from the top down. So the people in charge of these airports and hospitals, when they train their employees, they really need to talk to them about how to handle people with disabilities and what is
Right,
the
so why? So they aren't though.
exactly
And my point is,
should.
and my yeah, they should. They should. No, no, no kidding. I mean, my point is, if the people are not getting it, it's evident to me that either two things are happening, probably a combination of these. Either number one, either they are the people who are in the leadership of these organizations, airports, hospitals. I mean, it's two totally different, obviously two different cycles of leadership,
Mhm.
obviously, but whoever the leaders are in these types of organizations, either they are choosing not to educate their staff on how to behave, or they are just using the excuse of, well, we don't have the money for the training. But neither of those is an excuse for your staff to not know how to behave. So I'm kind of not feeling bad about this type of thing because it's the 21st century. You know, there's gonna come a time where people need to teach themselves how to fish for the rest of their life. I can't keep catching your fish, you know. So at some point, sorry, but at some point, man, you got to get it together. And it, and for the people who can't get it together, well, quite frankly, maybe you don't deserve that job then, right? If you can't do a job, it's nothing personal. If you can't do it, why are you doing it, right? I mean, you know, would you get into, again, back to Uber? Would you get into the same Uber with the same driver if you know every time you get in they crash their car and you end up in the hospital and you skin your knee? Of course not. That would be the definition of insanity, which is what I'm seeing in these types of industries. They do the same thing and expect different results, meaning they continuously do not train people, in my opinion. And in my opinion, they expect us to continuously train their people every single time. And sorry, but you know what? As a teacher, I love teaching people who want to learn. That's why all my students want to learn. So I love teaching them. But if you have to keep going back and teaching and teaching and teaching the same people who can't learn, sorry, man, I my patience evaporates. You know, so I think it's a I think it's great that you're into this thing of, you know, educating people as much as possible. No harm there, but I'm frustrated by how little of an effect all of this education has had. I don't know. Is any of this making sense to you? Do you see do you see my opinion in any of this?
I understand where you're coming from, but again, I mean, it's the reality is that this world, most people are not blind, and most people are not visually impaired. So there is that huge tide that we fight against. And I understand that it can be frustrating doing that all the time, but at the same time, we have to understand that, you know, I guess we're also there's so there's actually a minority of us who are blind and visually impaired. So in a way, we have to do that. Or I mean, we can stay there and wait for somebody else to do it and train people, or all we can do is do it ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, what concerns me though is, yes, I agree with what you're saying, but companies need to be able to train their staff appropriately, because
Yes.
a successful company should know what the facts are, and they should be able to train their staff, right? If you can't train your staff, then you can't run the ship, right? Who would
Hmm.
who would want to be who wants to be on a who wants to be on a sailboat in the middle of the ocean with no motor, right?
Hmm.
So if you're that type of ship with no sails and no motor in the middle of the ocean, I'm going to get an airplane and fly over you. I don't want to be on your ship. That's just the analogy. That's just how I see it, right?
Yeah, I
Why
agree.
why should we be spending taxpayer dollars every year on these services, hospitals, right, airports, public transportation? Why should we be taxed for it if you don't return the favor with appropriate service?
I
So,
agree.
you know, I do understand that that you want to educate people over and over again, and there's no harm in that. And at the same time, it's setting the precedent for them never really learning. Because then if they know, well, if Carrie comes back in 6 months, she'll just tell me again, and then I'll learn it again. You know what I mean? It's like it's like students at school, right? Saying that, well, I don't have to do good on the test because they'll just let me take it over.
Well, yeah, but remember, again, it's not the same people that we are talking to. It might be different, completely different
Well,
people.
they might be different individuals, sure, that's true.
Hmm.
But if they're working in the same location, they need to be able to do the same job. So
Hmm.
yeah, I group it together as it kind of is the same. I mean, just just saying. You know,
An interesting take on training is I used to work at a company that actually does hire a lot of blind and visually impaired
sure.
people,
So
and they had
so
a
tell me more. Yes. So by the way, so tell us more about your background and how you got into YouTube and stuff like that. Sure.
um, well, let me finish what I was going to say first, and
Sure.
then
Sure.
I'll get back into that. So they actually had something called, I think it was called Blind Sight or something, where they would go, a group of blind people would go to either a school, a company, a hospital, a business like Sam's Club or Walmart or something like that, Food Lion, um, and they would actually talk to the employees. As part of a training that they would do, and then they would blindfold the employees, and then the blind people would proceed to guide them using the and teach them how somebody with a cane would travel, and they would take them from point A to point B with those blindfolds on and them leading, and that is part of how they would um, train local business employees. So what would you think about that? What's your opinion on that?
I think that's great. If the employees are willing to actively learn and actively listen, and if they retain the information, then it's right. No, I'm
Yeah.
being serious. Are they actually willing to learn, or were they willing
Yes.
to receive? Well, then good.
Yes, and they actually partnered with the businesses to do those trainings. So I think that's one way to go about it. It puts the employees in the position where they're not just watching a video or hearing somebody talk about it, but experiencing it. So I think that adds another layer to the training.
It does, and that's interesting. Yes. And then your journey in YouTube. How long have you been a YouTuber?
Since 2018, actually, um, I used to work at a low vision center, and so I would be surrounded with technology, assistive technology, and patients and different clients who would need, of course, different things, whether it's a low vision specialist, we also had one there, and different magnifiers, or when they're totally blind, talking products or screen readers and all that kind of thing. And so I would help clients when they first learned they were visually impaired, or when they have been so for a while,